You've heard a lot of reasons why cancer is spreading. Let's look at some of the major arguments. Number one is that we're getting older, so cancer is inevitably on the rise. You hear on the news that we're living 20 years longer than people did in 1900. But that statistic is wrong because it includes infant deaths, which were very high in the early 1900s, and brings the average way down. Let's take a simple example using just two people. The first person lived to be 90 and the other lived to be 70. Taken together, their average lifespan would be 80. Now take two other people. One lived to be 90 and the other only lived to be 1 year old. Taken together, their average lifespan is just 45 years old due to the inclusion of the infant death. The correct way to compare longevity is to look at people who lived to be at least 65 in 1900 and today. In fact, we're really not living that much longer than people did in 1900. Yet only a small fraction of people died of cancer back then, compared to today. If you look at Okinawans, who are one of the oldest populations in the world, their cancer rates are extremely low compared to ours. But if they migrate to the U.S. and adopt our diet and lifestyle, they soon have the same rates of cancer that Americans do. In other words, getting older is not the reason for our explosion of cancer. Another argument commonly made is that environmental carcinogens are the cause of our cancer epidemic. But that's not true either. The low rates of cancer in Okinawa, for example, cannot be explained by a lack of environmental pollutants, as Okinawa is heavily industrialized and polluted. Don't get me wrong, environmental pollutants can cause cancers. As one author said recently, if we were cannibals, our meat would be banned from human consumption. Yet despite this pollution, only about 5% of our cancers are caused by environmental carcinogens. All you have to do is look at Okinawans, Seventh-day Adventists, or other groups who live among the pollution, yet have very low rates of cancer. Another source of cancer-causing agents is medical radiation. One expert has estimated that 75% of the incidence of breast cancer is caused from medical radiation. And although mammograms and other sources of radiation do contribute to breast cancer, they are not the primary cause. Why? The explosion in breast cancer started long before the widespread use of mammography. Some people also like to blame cancer on genetics, but genetics accounts for a small percentage of all cancers, only about 2%. Except for this small number, what the vast majority of us are inheriting from our families are bad habits, not bad genes.
I'm Italian. My family, what runs in my family are strokes, heart attacks, high cholesterol. Well, that's not what runs my family. What runs in my family is eating pasta, bread, brujol, sausages, and meatballs. That's what runs in my family.
You're neither doomed by a bad gene or saved by good ones. You can have a bad gene, but it does not mean it will become active, because most bad genes are not active unless the right conditions appear in the body. When this happens, they wake up and cause trouble. And most of these awakenings are the result of diet and lifestyle.
There is a genetic propensity to all diseases, but most people wouldn't realize their genetic propensity if they didn't stress their genes with unhealthy habits. Like, for example, some families, people get lung cancer when they smoke. You know, in other families they get emphysema. So our lung cancer and emphysema in smokers due to genetics. You step back and you say, of course not, they're due to this stupid habit of smoking. And it's the same thing with cancer and heart disease and diabetes. Yes, you have some genetic strengths and weaknesses that you present to life, and when you do things to yourself like smoke or drink alcohol or eat rich foods, those genetic strengths and weaknesses may express themselves. But if you never did that, you'd never find out whether you had a tendency to breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, diabetes. You would never find out those things because those problems do not occur in populations of people who eat a diet based on starches, vegetables, and fruits. You just don't see prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. Nobody has them. You know, hundreds of millions of people, nobody has them.
Since bad genes awaken due to changes in the body's environment, you can put them back to sleep with changes in diet and lifestyle. It's been shown, for example, that women carrying the mutated BRCA1 gene can reduce their risk of breast cancer up to 65% by simply losing weight. In fact, there are many other ways that women can greatly reduce their risk of activating bad genes through simple diet and lifestyle changes.
So even though you have the genetic predisposition, lifestyle will dampen that completely, and the gene does not have to manifest.
What do you think about healthy women getting preventive mastectomies in order to avoid breast cancer?
You know, it's almost I find it hard to even talk about because it's absurd. You know that, anyway, that would be like saying everyone, as soon as you finish your periods, you go in and get all your ovaries and your uterus is out, and men should have their prostates removed. I mean, that's not the problem.
What a strong family history suggests is a history of bad diet and lifestyle that awakens this gene.
All of us, I'm sure, we have a few genes that we'd rather not have. Either because we were born with them or because they were corrupted during our lifetimes by being exposed to certain agents. So we got a few genes there that could cause us problems. And they do cause problems if we continue to fertilize those genes. In other words, going from the genes to the disease is a long process. RNA, protein, enzyme, so forth. That's a long process there. That's the expression period. That's where nutrition operates. Protein and other nutrients sort of working together. They actually control the expression of mischievous genes, I say. Genes that might give rise to cancer, genes that might give rise to heart disease, genes that might do this, that, or something else. And we all got some of these kind of genes, that raise our vulnerability to those kinds of diseases. If we accept the idea that we've all got some genes that that might cause us some difficulties, if in turn we then turn around and don't fertilize those genes, with the wrong kinds of nutrients, wrong kinds of foods, we're okay. We can keep them under control.
Why did Japanese smokers have the highest per capita consumption of cigarettes in the world, and yet the lowest rate of lung cancer in the world? Why has cigarette consumption dropped sharply in the U.S., yet the incidence of lung cancer has not?
Men now are smoking only about half the rate they were. That started some 20, 30 years ago. If smoking causes cancer, and only half the people are now smoking as they used to do, then therefore, this leading cause of cancer, that rates ought to be about half, right? And you would expect, even with the other sort of still creeping up, that lung cancer chunk alone ought to be dropping at more than one case out of 200. It's not. The numbers they don't square up.
Why do a large percentage of lung cancers occur in people who never smoked? Why do we now have an epidemic of skin cancers, yet we spend most of our time indoors? Why was skin cancer uncommon before 1900 when most people were outdoors? Why are the highest rates of melanoma found in people who spend most of their time indoors? What these simple facts suggest is that something else is going on with cancer, something our current medical model does not explain, and in fact chooses to deliberately ignore. Only when you look at diet and lifestyle can we explain all the seeming contradictions with cancer, particularly the rise in the consumption of animal and refined foods, along with the corresponding decline in the consumption of whole plant foods. Throughout most of human history, whole plant foods were, on average, 95% of the human diet worldwide. Today, whole plant foods are just 7% of our diet. In other words, industrialized countries have turned the human diet upside down. It should be obvious that cancer would follow this radical change in diet. Here is a brief summary of the differences between plant foods, animal foods, and refined foods. When you look at the plant food column, every item fights cancer. Animal and refined foods, on the other hand, promote cancers. Most people will accept the notion that eating a diet high in plant foods will prevent most cancers. These same people, however, find it difficult to believe that you can actually reverse cancer by adopting a plant-based diet. In this sense, it's useful to think about Nathan Pritikin, who was the first person to prove that heart disease can be reversed with a plant-based diet. At the time, mainstream medicine said this was simply impossible. And after he reversed his heart disease, he was greeted with 20 years of skepticism and doubt by the medical community. So much so that he willed that his body be autopsied and the results published in a medical journal, which they were. His arteries were as clean as a teenager's. Through the work of doctors Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, and others, it has now been proven 1,000 times over that Nathan Pritikin's heart disease reversal was not a spontaneous remission, but the result of adopting a plant-based diet. Yet despite this overwhelming evidence, hospitals have not switched to diet as the primary method of treating heart disease. Why? There's simply no money in it. Instead, conventional medicine continues to treat the symptoms of heart disease with ineffective stents, statin drugs, and bypass surgeries, all of which bypass the cause of the problem. Another case of treating symptoms is adult-onset diabetes. The American Diabetes Association will tell you there is no cure for adult-onset diabetes, which simply means there is no drug that will cure the disease. And yet, adult-onset diabetes is easily and quickly cured with a change in diet and lifestyle.
So I don't really believe there are any intelligent people in the scientific community that have any doubt that type 2 diabetes is caused by the rich Western diet. I think everybody agrees with that. But what they don't do is they don't take the next step, which is to say, okay, this is the cause of it, so what you ought to do is you ought to change your diet.
They come in and get on this program, and in 24 hours, they have cut their insulin by half. On day number 5 or 6, they don't need insulin at all, ever again. Now that, when you hear about it, I know sometimes you may hear things like this and you think, that's impossible, how could that be true? The doctor says this is incurable, you can't reverse it. It is not true. You can completely heal diabetes, and very, very quickly.
In most cases, 5 to 7 days. We have a few cases that are particularly severe. It might take 2 weeks.
We find in 5 to 7 days someone with type 2 diabetes, if they eat a 100% plant-based diet, uncooked, they're no longer on insulin. I haven't seen that not happen.
So yes, the emphasis on treatment by the American Diabetic Association, by the American Heart Association, by the National Osteoporosis Foundation, and so on, they're all in the wrong direction. But they have a lot of big industry money that keeps them focused in that bad direction too. This didn't just happen by circumstance, by happenstance. This happened because there is an active flow of money that keeps them in the direction of drugs and not in the direction of good diet.
And it's not only cancer, but I have people come in with lupus and multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and chronic fatigue syndrome and schizophrenia and obesity and diabetes and arthritis and osteoporosis and on, all kinds of diseases, not just cancer. People with multiple sclerosis, some of them have even gone blind from these things, and we have reversed blindness from it. I've had people with MS that were debilitated. Not to even be able to get up and walk on their own. completely healed. Parkinson's patients coming in on day 1, shaking so dramatically that they couldn't even hold their hand out to shake it. By day 10, steady as a rock. Lupus. People come in wheelchairs sometimes. I mean, literally cannot raise their arm enough to feed themselves. And within 10 days, they're up and out of that wheelchair and walking. You know, AIDS and HIV. I've got so many testimonies now. I had one gentleman come. His viral load for AIDS was over 103,000 when he started my program. In 3 months, his viral load had dropped to 3,030. In 9 months, they could not detect the virus in his body, and his T cells had gone all the way back up. So we hear all the time that AIDS is incurable. Well, if it's incurable, then how is it disappearing from the body?
As you'll see, our major cancers can also be healed with diet. Just as drug companies and other vested interests have blocked curing heart disease, diabetes, and virtually all other chronic diseases with diet, they have also done everything they can to discourage using diet to cure cancer. Diet, in fact, is the 800-pound gorilla sitting in our kitchens that is causing virtually all of our major diseases. Yet conventional medicine continues to ignore this gorilla's presence. Since the early 1900s, allopathic medicine has seen any natural cure, such as diet, as a threat to their bag of profitable, toxic treatments. Our bodies cure cancer every day of our lives, and the difference between prevention and reversal is one of degree, not kind. In fact, the average American has 6 bouts with serious cancers during their lifetimes. That is, they actually reversed serious cancers 6 times in their lives without even knowing it. Those with healthy immune systems don't know about the battle their bodies are waging. Those with weakened immune systems will find out about these battles in the hospital. The foundation of a good immune system is diet. A good diet enables us to reverse cancer every day of our lives. Conventional medicine classifies cancer reversals as mysterious, spontaneous regressions. Yet, if you look into people who have made so-called spontaneous regressions, almost all had made major changes to a plant-based diet. According to conventional medicine, the rate of spontaneous remissions is so low, it is essentially zero. And yet, we see cancer reversals all the time in treatment centers which use diet as the basis for cancer reversals. In other words, there are simply too many reversals going on in treatment centers to be spontaneous.
In 1998, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. The options that I had at the time, she said that it was going to be chemotherapy and followed by a bone marrow transplant. I told her on my own I'm going to do research, and that's what I started doing, and came here and did the program. And in 2002 I had a bone marrow aspiration, a biopsy, and I was cancer free.
When confronted with the evidence of natural cancer reversals, most doctors will go into denial, saying there was a delayed response to conventional treatment, despite the gross ineffectiveness of those treatments. When there was no previous treatment, they will say it was misdiagnosed and not cancer in the first place. When the cancer is proven by surgery or biopsy, they ultimately fall back on this spontaneous regression excuse, all because these cancers do not fall within their medical understanding. And they will never admit to diet having anything to do with cancer reversals, simply because they know nothing about how powerful nutrition can be.
I kept all my records, always got a copy of everything, and some of the doctors that that are out there actually said I was misdiagnosed. They will not they will not give credit to the diet. No, he didn't want to hear it. he would ask me on the diet, after 3 months passed, and then, I was noticeably not dying after 3 months, and then 6 months, I didn't die, and I was actually looking better. He would ask me, so what are you doing now? And I would start to tell him, and he'd cut me off and didn't want to hear it.
But other doctors are overcoming their skepticism and are starting to get the message.
My own medical doctor that diagnosed me, he ended up writing the foreword in my book, Living Foods Lifestyle. He sends his patients to my center today, still. I've had many doctors come and take my course after they've had dying patients come to my center that they were convinced would never live, and then they become intrigued. They usually arrive with their arms folded and, that scowl, they're looking like, I don't believe any of it, and you've got to convince me. And I tell them on day one, I'm not here to try to convince you of anything. I'm going to show you what it is, and you have your own choice. You can believe it or not believe it. I'm not here to try to convince you to think the way that I think, but I ask them, how much nutritional training have you had? And when they really think about it, some of them will say an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours at the most of their entire medical career.
To be honest with you, the amount of nutrition training I receive that I would use today is close to zero, and that's what I'm spending a lot of my time doing, is relearning all the important nutrition information that's out there. I stumbled across the nutrition aspect, and once I saw how well it worked, I couldn't do anything but follow that path, because that's what really helped patients, and I finally saw them get better, which was not only exciting but rewarding. We got into the business to help patients get better, and we can't do that with the tools we were given in medical school.
The underlying fundamental reason behind natural cancer reversals is diet. Pancreatic cancer patients were divided into 2 groups. The first group made no dietary changes, and 99% were dead within a year. The second group consumed a moderately healthy plant-based diet, and 52% remained alive. Over the course of 6 years, the more vegetables lung cancer patients ate, the longer they lived. The more vegetables colon cancer patients ate, the longer they lived. In 1993, the National Cancer Institute published the results of a study of women who had tested positive for breast cancer. They told half the women to continue with their typical American diets and asked the other half to change to a plant-based diet. After only 4 years, almost 40% of the women who stayed on their typical diets had recurrences of breast cancer. Not a single woman who changed to a plant-based diet had a recurrence of breast cancer. Women who simply ate flaxseed muffins had a reduction in breast tumors equivalent to those taking the toxic drug tamoxifen, and without any side effects. Women who switched to low-fat diets had their estrogen levels drop by up to 50% within a few weeks. Women with early-stage breast cancer who changed to a slightly healthy plant-based diet, combined with exercise, cut their risk of death in half. A change to a plant-based diet reduced the recurrence of cancer by 300% in stage 3 colon cancer patients. A change to a plant-based diet inhibited the growth of prostate cancer cells by almost 8 times compared to the control group. After changing to a full plant-based diet and not receiving conventional treatments, 82% of patients with stage 2 melanoma were alive 5 years after treatment began, compared to just 39% on conventional treatment who did not change their diet. For stage 4 melanoma, 39% were alive after 4 years, compared to just 6% on conventional treatments who did not change their diets. In another study, patients with malignant melanoma who adopted a plant-based diet in stages 1 and 2 had a 100% survival after 5 years. For those who adopted the diet in stage 3, there was a 71% survival. For stage 4, there was a 39% survival after 5 years. The median survival time for men with prostate cancer is just 6 years following conventional treatment. For those who rejected conventional treatment and went on a plant-based diet, they were all alive after 19 years. A woman with ovarian cancer wanted to compare conventional therapy outcomes to the Gerson therapy.
And they asked the doctor to give her some names and addresses of his former patients. He gave her 20 names, 18 of which had died. Then she asked the same thing of the Gerson Institute, the Gerson Hospital. They gave her 20 names of terminally ill patients, 18 of which were alive and well and answered and were fine, 2 of which had died.
Without any medical interventions, without any alternative interventions, without any supplements, without anything like that, here's a woman with a stage 3 cancer that was completely healed within 6 months.
In other words, when the outcomes of diets designed to fight cancer are compared to conventional treatments, those diets beat the pants off surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation.
What I find interesting is that many of the conventional allopathic physicians and or their spouses come to us and say, please don't say anything. Please let's keep this secret. I don't want my colleagues to know that we're going this route.
Americans practically worship animal protein, yet it is the strongest carcinogen we will ever encounter in our lives. This is not something that has been recently discovered. It's something that has been ignored due to our obsession with eating meat. In the 1960s, researchers in India thought by increasing animal protein, it would help cure cancer. What they found was just the opposite. In 100% of the cases, increasing the consumption of animal protein caused cancer. During the 1980s, Dr. Robert Good discovered that mice that were fed a lower protein diet had fewer cancers. He confirmed this by studying the low-protein diets of Aborigines in Australia, who had extremely low rates of cancer. T. Colin Campbell has also confirmed the protein-cancer connection, but with more precision and depth. Like the researchers in India, he injected rats with a powerful carcinogen to induce liver cancer. When they were fed a 20% animal protein diet, 100% of them developed cancer. When they were fed a 5% protein diet, none of them developed cancer, despite the presence of the carcinogen.
Where those researchers, also interested in liver cancer, were feeding rats 2 different levels of protein, with the idea that the higher levels of protein might help to prevent the development of that kind of cancer. And what they saw and what they reported was exactly the reverse. The higher levels of protein, I would call the normal levels, all those animals got liver cancer when they were exposed to a carcinogen. The animals that fed the lower levels of protein did not. And so all of a sudden, and it was like 100, not to score. I mean, all the animals in the group fed the higher levels of protein got cancer, and none in the lower level.
Dr. Campbell found that cancer could even be turned on and then turned off by varying the level of animal protein in the diet.
We could actually turn on and turn off cancer just by giving them protein or taking it away.
It was also found that casein, the primary protein in all dairy products, was the most aggressive cancer promoter of all. In contrast, when the animals were fed a diet of 20% vegetable protein, none of them developed cancer, despite the presence of the carcinogen. Cancer was only triggered with animal protein. In further experiments, they found that regardless of how many carcinogens entered the body, the development of cancer was totally dependent on how much animal protein was consumed. In other words, the consumption of animal protein makes us more susceptible to cancer. This is one reason why populations such as the Okinawans and other groups who eat plant-based diets have much lower cancer rates. In effect, their plant-based diets form a green light around them, protecting them from cancer. Dr. Campbell did further studies to investigate whether nutrients other than protein might promote or reverse cancer. With stunning consistency, nutrients from all animal foods grew tumors, while nutrients from plant foods shrank tumors. In other words, environmental agents are the seeds for cancer. Animal foods are the fertilizers that allow these cancer seeds to grow. How well do these studies translate into human terms?
The biochemistry that operates to cause cancer, let's say in an experimental animal, is essentially the same kind of biochemistry operating in humans.
Dr. Campbell had a unique opportunity to test these findings as he directed the largest nutritional study ever conducted in human history. His conclusion? Differences in cancer rates corresponded directly to differences in the amount of animal protein consumed. The more animal protein, the more cancer.
That as soon as small amounts of animal-based foods began to appear in certain diets in China, that's when Western diseases began to appear. Even putting reasonably small amounts of animal food into the diet, animal protein of course, would tend to elevate blood cholesterol levels that lead to heart disease, would tend to associate with emerging increases in cancer risk. And so the China study became then quite interesting and exciting, the results, but primarily in the context of what went on before. Had we done the China project alone and only the China project, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here telling the same kind of story, because it was somewhat limited, in terms of establishing, of course, cause and effect relationships. And as we started to investigate that question, how does protein cause cancer? And we looked at a variety of different kinds of things, and every time we looked for a mechanism, we found one. In my way of thinking, that was probably one of the most important observations I think I made during the last 50 years. Because it turns out that when you got these relationships between causes and effects, they operate through a whole symphony of reactions, all highly integrated and working in ways in which, the response is produced. And so that begins to challenge in a major way the way we think about nutrition, the way we think about health, and especially the way we think about medical practice. It's sort of like the body saying, okay, I need protein, but don't give me more than I need. Especially don't give me the protein coming from other animals. What I was interested in those kind of studies was to learn something about principles. Because what I was beginning to see were things that were challenging fundamental assumptions and fundamental principles. I mean, one of which is, for example, can cancer really be reversed? Can it be reversed by just simply altering nutrient intake? Again, that's something that was unheard of. Starting out believing that animal protein was the greatest food, was food from heaven or whatever, and finding out it's the problem, not the solution. And it's the one that's been ignored. Everybody talks about vitamins and minerals and fat and fiber and so forth and so on. But the nutrient that has driven the debate, has driven our practice, has driven everything, more than any other thing, is basically our reverence for animal protein. Either directly or indirectly, our assumptions about medicine and healthcare really can be traced to that awesome reverence for that nutrient. It tends to increase the activity of a really important enzyme called the mixed function oxidase. It's in the liver. It converts a normal cell to a cancer cell. Just the protein can do that. That's one thing. It does many, many things. It tends to impair the immune system. Specifically, we found, for example, that it impaired the activity of these so-called natural killer cells. Animal protein will tend to increase estrogen and hormone levels. That in turn might be associated with breast cancer. It modulates energy relationships. I mean, the animal protein itself does a whole bunch of different things that all tend to converge in the same direction to actually create more cancer. The combination of all these things working together, of which there are incidentally countless things. I mean, hundreds of thousands of probably different kinds of chemicals in food that can operate together like this, and they're working as a symphony. And the final effect is either health or disease, depending on whether you're working with the wrong stuff or the right stuff.
Another reason why animal protein causes cancer has to do with digestive enzymes, or a shortage of them. Cancer cells have a protective protein coating around them, which makes them invisible to the immune system. The pancreas produces two enzymes necessary to digest animal protein. In addition to digesting animal protein, only these enzymes can dissolve the protein coating around cancer cells, which makes them visible to the immune system so they can then be destroyed. Animal protein requires a lot of enzymes to digest it, and eating a diet high in animal protein can actually cause a shortage of pancreatic enzymes. When this happens, cancer cells will keep their protective protein coating and remain invisible to the immune system and start multiplying. In contrast, pancreatic enzymes are not necessary to digest vegetable protein, so you can eat as much vegetable protein as you want, and the supply of enzymes available to unmask cancer cells will remain plentiful. Successful cancer therapies are now being used based on expensive pancreatic enzyme supplementation, although it's much easier and cheaper to simply change your diet. These findings fit together with Dr. Campbell's findings. Animal protein promotes cancer, and vegetable protein does not. They also agree with thousands of studies linking animal foods with cancer. What's amazing is that it has taken all these studies to confirm what was obvious to observers in the late 1800s. The reason Japanese smokers had low rates of lung cancer is because their plant-based diets protected them by not allowing the cancer to be promoted. But as their diets changed and their consumption of animals increased, their rates of lung cancer increased correspondingly.
Japanese smoke. To this day, you can go in, or I haven't been there in a few years, but until recently you could go into a bank and they were smoking. But their incidence of lung cancer was way lower than expected. As soon as the Western diet was introduced, lung cancer went up. Well, do hamburgers cause lung cancer? No. But if you've planted the seed with tobacco smoke, the eating of the animal products will increase it. It's like fertilizer. So we find that the people who remain on a closer to a plant-based diet are the ones who have at least amount of cancer. If we look at Micronesia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and we look at people that have this much animal intake, have this much heart disease, this much cancer. You go to the U.S., Germany, or Great Britain, they have this much animal intake, they have this much heart disease, this much cancer.
The reason we have an epidemic of skin cancers today is not because of sun exposure, but because our diets allow the initiation and promotion of skin cancer.
Skin cancer, incidentally, is also a dietary thing. A lot of the DNA damage that we experience from time to time, whether it's from sunshine or chemicals or whatever, that kind of damage automatically, in most cases, gets repaired. But it's not a 100% repair process. A little escapes repair, and so we leave behind a little residue that we don't want. And it turns out the diet, again, affects that repair process.
We don't have to look at studies to see how powerful diet can be in protecting us from cancer. We can look at people who have battled and then reversed cancer with a change in diet. Take the story of Meg Wolf. As documented in her book, it was discovered she had a malignant tumor in her leg. The treatment? They amputated her leg and put her on a regimen of drugs. A few years later, the cancer showed up in her thyroid. The treatment? They removed half her thyroid and put her on a regimen of new drugs. A few years later, the cancer spread to her breast and lymph nodes. The treatment? They amputated her breasts, put her on a regimen of new drugs, chemotherapy, and radiation. None of these treatments worked. They caused horrific side effects, and she was told to prepare for death. As her doctors were pronouncing her terminal, she discovered macrobiotics, a plant-based diet composed largely of brown rice and vegetables. After stopping the toxic treatments and switching to macrobiotics, her body started to recover, until she was completely healed of cancer. Conventional medicine had missed the point. While they were amputating body parts and treating the symptoms of cancer, they completely ignored what was causing the cancer in the first place and left a ticking time bomb inside her body.
The body is born with an amazing self-healing ability. It has a complex matrix of systems that basically work really well as long as you give it what it needs. Out of every 1,000 calls we get, most of them are from people that have been diagnosed with cancer. We have people calling us all the time who have been told they're going to die in a few months, and they're not crying. They're joking with us on the phone. They say, I'm going to beat this. They're saying, I want to come and learn what I can do to support my recovery. And those are the people it's going to work for. I'll tell you the story of Elaine Nussbaum, who wrote a wonderful book on her own recovery from cancer. It's called Recovery from Cancer. She had uterine cancer which metastasized to the bones throughout her body. In fact, she was in a body cast. And she was going downhill and downhill, was given a short time to live when someone told her about macrobiotics. We were able to supply 6 cases of metastatic cancer who had all not been given hope with medical means, stopped the medicine, started macrobiotics, and fully recovered. These were cases of pancreatic cancer, uterine metastasized to the bones, malignant melanoma, metastasized to the colon, all terminal cases. They all recovered.
I came from a diet, a very gourmet European diet. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I started taking steroids for that. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I would have pneumonia at least once, if not twice a year. Chronic fatigue and lupus. Basically tested positive for all autoimmune disorders. After this had gone on for about 8 months, 9 months, I ended up in bed. I could not move at that point. I needed assistance to do just regular daily living. By the time I was 34, I was in massive pain all over my body. I got to a point where I couldn't shower because I was in so much pain. The water would actually physically hurt me. And they biopsied it and found out that I actually did have cancer. And they thought that it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they wanted to stage me, so they did a bone marrow tap. And after they had done that, and I went back to see the oncologist, she told me that I was stage 4, that it was in my bone marrow, and within 3 months I would be dead. My oncologist told me that if I didn't do any kind of cancer treatments, she would not put me on disability. So I was not put on disability. I met a friend who started coming to my house and making me macrobiotic meals. And within 6 days, after being in bed for 9 months, after 6 days I was able to get up. And I took my first shower. It was the only thing I'd ever done that actually made me feel better instead of worse.
Dr. Jane Plant was struck by breast cancer. She had a radical mastectomy, 3 further operations, 40 radiation treatments, and 12 chemotherapy treatments. None of these treatments worked. The cancer kept coming back. Not just once or twice, but 5 times, and to different parts of her body. The last tumor was on her neck, and chemo was not effective. She then adopted a plant-based diet and specifically eliminated all dairy products. Within days, the lump started to soften and shrink. Within 6 weeks, the tumor was completely gone. She had cured herself of the disease.
In 1999, in February, I was diagnosed with both breast and cervical cancer. My doctor told me I would die in 6 months to a year at the maximum. And then the doctor immediately said that I had to have surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. But I refused those treatments because I had family members, my mother, all of my aunts on my mother's side, and my one aunt on my dad's side had all had either breast, cervical, uterine, or ovarian cancer. And they had done surgery and chemotherapy and radiation. And either the treatments killed them or their cancers came back with a vengeance. And it was very horrific in watching what happened to them. I was prepared to do anything other than that, meaning the surgery, the chemo, and the radiation. The lump that was in my breast was about the size of $50. In 1 month, it was about the size of a dime. That's how dramatically it shrunk. The bleeding that I'd had from the cervical tumors that had been really, really strong and going for quite a while, in 30 days, it was completely stopped.
Brenda now helps terminally ill cancer patients, as well as people with a wide spectrum of diseases.
I've had lots of terminal, hopeless, incurable. This is what they tell me. They come and they say, I hear stories like this. The doctor says that what I have is untreatable, that there really isn't anything that they can do for it, and that all that they can do now is to manage my pain. I have people that say the doctor has said I only have a few months or a few weeks. So I get a lot of those people. And I have seen people that have come back from brain cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, melanomas, and every other type of cancer.
One of Brenda's clients was Elizabeth Capadia.
And they sent me for an MRI, and I had a tumor on my pancreas. They gave me a chance of a 50-50 chance of living with the operation. They're going to take the pancreas out, and they told me that they would probably the gallbladder was bad, and they would take the gallbladder out as well.
After attending Brenda's program, she went back to the doctor for another MRI.
But I said I need it because I did a nutritional change, and so they finally said okay, and they sent me to for another MRI, and the tumor was completely gone.
She said, Brenda, I went back to the doctor. She said, they've had me come back in 4 times. They've retested me again and again because, believe it or not, they cannot find cancer anywhere in my body.
There are thousands of well-documented biopsy-proven cases of cancer reversals due to diet. Here is a list of some of the cancers that have been healed naturally. People in the cancer industry, as well as the general public, are looking for a magic bullet drug that will miraculously cure cancer. The latest research frontier is cancer vaccines. Every vaccine out there is based on stimulating your immune system, which is impaired because of our lousy diets. You don't have to wait for an expensive vaccine. You can accomplish the same thing and vaccinate your body by getting real medicine from real foods that will put a green light around your body. We also read in the news about so-called superfoods for fighting cancer. Blueberries fight this type of cancer, curry fights that type of cancer, a chemical in raspberries causes certain cancer cells to commit suicide, and so forth. These are nutritional magic bullets, but they won't work unless the rest of your diet is designed to fight cancer. A few berries on top of your cheesecake won't make a dent against cancer. It is not this food or that food, but your entire nutrient profile that is going to fight cancer. The hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions the body has with the food it encounters. If all those reactions are going in the right direction, you can beat cancer with diet. In order for cancer to survive in your body, it needs the right environment, and that is primarily determined by what you put into your mouth. Please visit our website, where we have references to clinics, books, and other resources that have helped people reverse cancers naturally. What these programs do is nothing short of a blood transfusion that floods your body with nutrients it has literally been dying for. If you have cancer, I would highly recommend you visit a clinic that has a successful track record reversing cancers using diet and lifestyle changes. They have specialized programs and can tailor a diet to your individual needs, as well as provide the support most people need. When you consider that almost all of their patients have already been devastated by conventional treatments and been sent home to die, Their records with cancer reversals are nothing short of miraculous. To be sure, you will not get these dietary guidelines from the cancer industry, because they, admittedly, do not know how to prevent, much less reverse, cancer. There are a number of clinics in the U.S. and throughout the world which offer concentrated natural supplementation, such as intravenous vitamin C, pancreatic enzyme therapy, Laetrile, and a host of other treatments. Many of these treatments have been successful in helping to reverse cancers and may be worth your investigation. But no matter how natural or how successful such supplementation may be, none will be successful in the long term unless you attack the root cause of cancer by changing your diet and lifestyle.
It does not heal cancer. It does not restore the body's defenses. It doesn't restore the liver and the immune system and the enzyme system and the pancreatic enzymes. It doesn't restore. It can help the body fight cancer, but it doesn't heal.
I would advise that you stay away from any non-natural synthetic supplementation. 1,000 milligrams of daily vitamin C in pill form has been shown to reduce the risk of stomach cancer. Yet, just 37 milligrams of natural vitamin C from an orange will lower the risk by twice as much.
Rather than taking pills, is to have someone get a juicer out and make some really healthy green juices. I don't like a lot of sweet juices because they feed the cancer, and we don't really want to do that, so fruit juices are out. But green juices, and you can put a few apples in to make it taste good and a little bit of lemon. There's ways of making it taste delicious. But when you take this much vegetable and you extract the fiber and you've got this much liquid, you couldn't possibly have eaten that much, but you can drink that much. And you're getting not only the phytonutrients and all that, you're getting the enzymes, you're getting things that we have not even discovered about from there. So that's the way we approach supplementation.
Synthetic supplementation throws the body off balance and results in side effects. A recent study, for example, shows that artificial fortification of food with folic acid greatly increases the risk of colon cancer. The take-home lesson: get your folic acid and other nutrients from foods in their natural packages, because they are far more powerful than synthetic substitutes. I know of people who have had successful supplementation treatments. Because of the success, they went back to eating a typical American diet. Guess what? Their cancers returned with their bad diet, despite the supplementation. Magic bullets, natural or not, will only go so far. They may be good at providing a temporary fix, but if you want the cancer to go away for the rest of your life, you have to stick to the fundamentals.
Fundamental therapy is really number one, and that is, how do we stop making cancer? Because it doesn't matter how good you are at getting rid of it, if it's not going to stay gone, then you haven't done anything. If you're diagnosed with cancer, realize something. That the person that diagnosed you has cancer, and probably everyone in your family has cancer, and we all have cancer. Getting cancer should not be a surprise to anyone. Will you survive it? And yes, it is survivable. It's survivable by reversing the conditions that brought it on. If you had an aquarium and the fish were sick, the veterinarian would not say, bring me fish, he'd say, bring me a cup of the water, I'll tell you what's wrong with the fish. And if you had a garden and it was failing, the first thing you would look at is the soil. Well, we have a soil, and we're the gardeners, and we will have a harvest. I tell them that my job is to try to selectively target and kill the cancer as best I can, and enhance your immune system as best I can. But your job is to stop making cancer. We change our body every 8 months, so if I have cancer now and I had it 8 months ago, it's because I'm continuing to make it. When I have two people, same particular type of cancer, same stage, the one who embraces the lifestyle changes, and I mean embraces it, is happy, not as doing it as a burden. Oh, I've got to eat this way. But the person who says, I feel, wow, what an opportunity this is. That person, I have on the other one who has absolutely rejected it. Guess which one's still alive?
Attitude can play a large role, not only in healing cancer, but any disease. An example of just how powerful attitude can be is illustrated by the woman who was given a chemotherapy placebo and her hair fell out. Conversely, many cancers have been cured because of the placebo effect. In fact, some have said that those few who recover under the destructive medicines of chemotherapy and radiation have largely the placebo effect to thank. An angry, stressed, or depressed mind can greatly suppress the immune system and allow cancer to grow. In one study, it was found that depression doubled the risk of cancer. Attitude is not only important with cancer, but with any disease. Norman Cousins was diagnosed with a deadly, incurable disease. Instead of doctors, he turned to the Marx Brothers and laughed himself to health, because laughter stimulates the immune system better than any drug on the planet. Dr. Anthony Santolaro, who reversed his terminal prostate cancer with diet, was very skeptical because of his training as a medical doctor. However, he kept his mind open that diet might work, and that is all you have to do. Most importantly, you have to shift your thinking from being a helpless victim to being someone who is willing to take charge of their own health.
I believe that anyone who has the willingness and the initiative deep down in their own heart to heal themselves can do it. It is never too late. What we tell people here is that we have never healed a person in 51 years. Not because we're frightened to say that, because it's true. People heal themselves. We are cheerleaders. We encourage them. We have massive experience, and we can guide them with this experience. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're at home alone, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, apt to heal or not to heal themselves. So we've seen so many of these people have the courage to heal themselves in spite of the fact that some professional told them they had none.
Ultimately, I'm a pragmatist. If something works, I use it. If it doesn't, I don't use it. For the vast majority of cancers, conventional treatments simply do not work. And personally, I would never use any of them on any cancer. You can greatly increase your odds of extending that 5-year survival rate by changing your diet, even if you choose to have conventional treatments. If caught during the initiation or promotion stage, a true anti-cancer diet has a 100% chance of reversing the disease, in my opinion. Beyond that, the odds obviously become longer. When there is not complete recovery, nutritional treatments have extended patients' lives from months to years. In the worst cases, nutritional treatments have minimized or eliminated the pain and suffering patients endured in their final days. And in all cases, it has enhanced the quality of their lives, allowing them to spend their time living instead of dying. The trick, of course, is not to get a major cancer at all, because preventing cancer is a lot easier than reversing it. The person who follows a lousy diet and lifestyle dies slowly. He has a decades-long descent into death that is marked by ill health, drugs, and medical care. The person who follows a good diet and active lifestyle dies quickly and avoids that slow, painful descent into death. The difference between the two is the quality of life. We now have a standardized conveyor belt-like delivery of cancer therapy that, in the vast majority of cases, leads directly to the funeral home. Since the war on cancer began, we have been involved in a massive experiment which uses our bodies, our health, our wealth, and our goodwill to test the proposition that modern science can improve upon the medicines found in nature. In the case of cancer, they cannot, and never will. And in time, the war on cancer will be regarded as one of the biggest tragedies in medical history. Mary Harrington healed stage 4 melanoma. My father did not. The doctor told him he was terminal, that he should go home and prepare to die, and that is exactly what he did. Had I known then what I know now, things would have been different. Treatments were available, but his doctor did not know about them, nor did I. But I now have hope for others. I hope that people will take charge of their lives and realize that changing their diets can change their destiny. I hope they will explore all options and make their own decisions about their health. What matters after you're gone is not what you've learned, but what you've taught. So I hope you will take this message to others and teach them how to heal themselves. I hope that although we must all die eventually, you will want to die with dignity and on your terms, not the terms of unproven, ineffective medicines. And finally, I hope that you will realize that true cures, long-term healing, always works from the inside out. Thank you for joining me today.